Oh, I think we're in good shape. I think we've got a show salvaged here. Mike's on the line. Mike Black.
I could not figure out what was going on until I realized that my monitor wasn't plugged in. How you doing, Mark?
It's a solid man who's willing to admit his mistake.
Dude, I've been all over it lately with this computer, man. Whew. How you been?
I'm good.
Good
I'm
to
doing
hear.
better now that you showed up, because otherwise, not like I can necessarily dissect the Oregon football roster.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot going on with the team too, especially with the spring heating up and the quarterback battle and everything going on there.
Yeah, let's start there. So we got Mike Black on the line. You can follow him on Mike Black on Twitter. Let's find that Twitter handle so everybody can find you. There it is. And the podcast.
Yes. The Ducks and Dogs podcast. It's everywhere you can find your podcast, as well as the Hot Mic podcast. We are running both of those. The first episode of the Hot Mic podcast has officially been recorded and is getting ready to drop.
Hot Mic podcast, Ducks and Dogs. Yep. Do we spell that with an A and a W?
Yeah. Ducks, ANDDAWGS.
There it is. Okay, let's fix this ID there. There again. Follow Mike on Twitter, and again, his two podcasts, Hot Mic podcast and also Ducks and Dogs podcast. So the Hot Mic podcast, that's been going on, a couple months. How's that been working out?
The Hot Mic podcast, we've been recording episodes for a little while now where we're doing some exclusive interviews with certain people that can go up anytime. And so what I'm trying to do is backlog some content because I do property management for public supermarkets. So not always certain I'll be able to record. So I've been backlogging a bunch of content just to make sure I'll be able to have something to go daily. And we're launching here in a week.
Okay, Mike, let's look at this quarterback situation in Eugene. Bo Nix. So he comes in from Auburn.
Bo Nix.
And we've got a couple highly rated guys that have yet to play much in Jay Butterfield and Ty Thompson. And I would guess that the fan base excitements with Ty Thompson, but I got to think that Bo Nix is the guy that's the big favorite.
You know, Mark, I think we had this conversation about a year ago. we had the same conversation about a year ago with Anthony Brown. Yeah, to me, I know people are like, yeah, it's going to be an open competition. Coaches are always going to say that, but a guy with the name recognition of Bo Nix isn't traveling 3,000 miles without some sort of, you're probably going to start there. It's just not, I wish it was how it works. And it's just, he was coming here just to straight compete. And, maybe he is. There's a long shot. Maybe it is. But in modern college football and in the sports industry in general, you're not going that far without some sort of guarantee, because he had other options he could have went to and had some sort of guarantee that he was going to start.
So you think this is all window dressing, that Bo Nix wins regardless?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you're bringing in a guy with the name of Bo Nix without getting them to start. I mean, last year you saw this with a lot of schools. Whether they finished the season starting was a different story, but Utah took in their transfer. He started week 1. Georgia played JT Daniels to start with. Oregon played Anthony Brown. These schools aren't taking in transfers for them to sit. They're taking, you got JT Daniels going to, can't think of the school. But Rattler going to South Carolina. And all of these guys aren't going there to sit. These guys are going to play. And I just have to believe that's the case with Bo Nix as well.
But then you've got a 5-star who I believe is the highest ranked quarterback signing in the history of the school in Ty Thompson. And he sat last season. He's going to be sitting for 2 consecutive seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been of late an issue with Oregon having guys on the roster who are talented, but they're like, oh, this guy isn't experienced. Then they don't want to play anybody without experience, which never gets your talented guys experience. I have a feeling, it just seems like to me next year we're going to be going after a transfer quarterback again, because just seem to be stuck in the quarterback purgatory ever since we replaced Shuck for Brown.
Okay. What would you like to see happen? Do you think Bo Nix is so overwhelmingly better with the experience factor in his favor to just give him the job versus having an open competition, especially considering the other two are highly evaluated?
Yeah, I would love an open competition, and I would root for Ty in that competition. But if it came down to it, I really think that Jay Butterfield would win the competition. There's been a lot of hype around Jay Butterfield. There were even rumors that Joe Moorhead wanted to play Jay Butterfield last year, and the article that came out, Coda, he was on Oregon staff last year, said that they had conversations about replacing Anthony Brown early in the season, mid-season, late season, and halftime of the bowl game. How you have the conversation that many times and never make a move, beyond me. But so they wanted to make moves, and it seems like Mario Cristobal was just keeping it. Anthony Brown was his guy, and he wanted to play him. I'm hoping it could come out and it could be Jay Butterfield. Jay Butterfield's really talented.
The big news of the past week in regards to the 2022 recruiting class is that arguably the best offensive tackle on the board was the last one on the board of the top 300 players in the nation. And he, again, we're talking left tackle. We're talking at the top of the board, very similar to a situation just last season where JT Tuimoloau was the last player on the board as arguably the best player in the country coming out of the state of Washington. Of course, eventually made his way to Ohio State late in the process. And here we are a year later, and Josh Connerly, last guy on the board, goes Ducks. Why do you think he chose Oregon?
I really think because there was a whole stint where Washington fans were really confident they were going to be able to land him because of this whole thing of he wants to be close to home. He's a family oriented kid and he loves his family. He loves being close to home. He always talked about putting on for Seattle, and with the damage Jimmy Lake did and with how Washington's been of late, it's hard to put on for Seattle and stay in the state of Washington if you want to actually compete in the top end of college football, at least in the last 6 years. Whenever Chris Peterson left Washington? Yeah, it's been difficult to be able to put on for Seattle. And on top of that, you have the offensive line production that these schools have had in the past few years. Washington had a guy, Alex Kirkland, who everyone thought was going to be a really high pick, and he had to come back because his stock has fallen there. Oregon's had Penei Sewell go into the draft. TJ Bass is looking to have a really good projection coming into the next year. This will be his last year at Oregon. The easy readiness to playing early. He'll be able to play not this year, but next year. Once Bass is gone, he'll probably be the starting left tackle. And the NIL. There's so many other factors that play into it where it came down to USC and Oregon. And thankfully, he just stayed at Oregon.
I recently unveiled coaches' rankings in each conference and then put them all together and did a national rankings, not just the top 10 or 25. I ranked all the coaches in the Power 5. Well, Of course, Dan Lanning's 0-0. Joey McGuire, Texas Tech, 0-0. Number of coaches obviously getting their first experience as a head coach. So in a sense, they've done nothing. They've shown us nothing to an extent. And of course, the wins and the losses are what eventually counts. But I did make a differentiation in Dan Lanning's favor for a number of things. He coached 2 playoff games with Georgia. And yes, Georgia took a little responsibility off of his plate, but still, he was traveling like a madman from coast to coast for the matter of 3 to 4 weeks, something in that range, and had to make his way through 2 playoff games and a national championship game, and took care of business with Georgia, obviously. Still maintained a recruiting class, worked his rear end off to maintain that class in 2022. Is in the running for a number of top flight players, doesn't seem to be backing down, seems to have a full throttle. We're going to go after the best ourselves, regardless of where the player is. We believe he's the talent that we need and fits the program. We're going after him. And of course, the Josh Connerly signing. So the 0-0 record, of course, is what it is at this point. Nothing can be proven, but I'm impressed with the start.
Yeah, it's been a really solid start for Dan Lanning. He's had a lot of momentum on the trail, but there's also been the downs as well with the Nico Iamavela situation. And there was a whole lot more going on with that. I had talked to a few other recruits at the quarterback position Oregon was pursuing, and when they were on visits, they didn't say a name in particular, but they said when they were on visits, they basically got ignored by Dillingham for a 2023 quarterback, and that was some of the sentiment we heard about Rashada, and now Rashada's trending Ole Miss or Miami. And with the quarterback room, the age that they're all at, and if Ty doesn't get to play this year, there's a chance he's gone after the year because he thinks, oh, I've sat here for 2 years, haven't had any with how it is in the modern day. These guys aren't going to just sit here and sit the bench for 3 years, play their 1 year, and then declare. It's not going to work like that. So I really think we need to land a quarterback, and that's been one of the only downs so far is how they handled that situation so far. Otherwise, it's all looking good as long as they can keep pulling in this West Coast talent and just pushing on some of the East Coast talent. They offered some of these guys in Florida that the previous staff just would not offer. We had Cormani McClain had sent messages to the DB coach at Oregon. Had sent messages to me that I forwarded to the DB coach at Oregon about wanting an Oregon offer. He's probably, I think he's the best player in the country in the 2023 class. And he couldn't get an offer when he was asking for it. That makes no sense. But now he's got one. So they're pushing farther into the South, and they have a lot of big name recruiters like Lupoy, Lanning, and all these guys on the staff. And we'll just got to have to see how it works out long term.
Mike, is Noah Sewell the best linebacker in the country?
Ooh.
I know that's a tough call to make off the top of your head, but just, I guess the broader point is basically just give us your take on Noah Sewell.
Noah Sewell is a monster. He's probably going to be the first. I don't want to say defensive player because the value of edge is so much higher than the value of a linebacker, but he's probably going to be the first linebacker off of the board in the next draft. I don't know what edge is going to come out and just blow us all away and be the either top pick of the draft or the first non-quarterback taken. But yeah, he's a great linebacker. If he's not first, he's second. I can't remember the name, but there's an SEC linebacker that's on the tip of my tongue. He's really solid too. It's between him and Sewell. And yeah, Sewell's an absolute monster. I cannot wait to see him play under a linebackers coach in Dan Lanning, especially with a defensive coordinator in Tosh Lupoy. Oregon fans were not very happy with the defensive scheme last year with DeRuiter. I had to forget the name already. I was trying to, man. Yeah, the scheme was more favorable for a defensive end, and it didn't take advantage of the talent we had at linebacker. And linebacker was one of the positions where we actually had depth that was able to play. We had, to start the year at least, we had Flo, Sewell, Brown, Jackson. Like we had a bunch of guys ready to play, and it seemed like we were using more defensive ends and defensive linemen as linebackers than linebackers in general.
Could we be talking about Henry To'oTo'o at Alabama?
No, I think I'm thinking of one at Georgia, the one who stayed there.
Channing Tindall?
I think so. I really like Tindall. Yeah, Tindall. I really like Tindall. Henry had a really strong finish to the season. He struggled a little bit the first couple of games. He's really solid too. He's a really talented player. Still mad that we had no chance of getting him because they weren't going to the Pac-12.
Could be Jalen Carter. He's also
Jalen Carter's
a Georgia
really good
guy.
too. Yeah, there's a
Smith,
bunch.
I don't necessarily know. He's kind of a little outside linebacker, D end.
He seems.
Kirby says that Channing Tindall is gone. Okay.
Oh, he's gone. Then I am tweaking. Well, then yeah, it'd probably be between
not Will Anderson.
It'd be between To'o and Sewell then for myself, unless someone else comes out and has an insane next level unexpected breakout. And speaking of linebackers who could have an unexpected breakout, Justin Flo is hopefully healthy for the first time in his career at Oregon. That would be a great duo.
I see some comments about Justin Flo being overrated. It's probably more an injury situation of him not being on the field rather than overrated.
Yeah, when he's been on the field, he's looked insane. He was on the field for, I can't remember which game, and had 11 tackles off rip. Like he was going nuts. And then he's just gotten hurt twice, once in walkthroughs, which gotta love that. Someone getting hurt in walkthroughs before your biggest game of the season. We won it, but yeah, he's just had injury luck. When he's on the field, he looks next level. He is insane.
Sean Nichols is calling you Mike Black, the second most pessimistic person covering Oregon football. I've never caught that from you.
Oh, I don't think we're going 12-0, so I'm pessimistic.
I was going to say, how many times have we had you on here? 25, and
a bunch.
That's never hit me that way.
Yeah, a lot of it has been pasted in. I've been involved with the Oregon Twitter on how I believe Bo Nix is pretty much guaranteed to be the quarterback unless Cam Newton in 2010 walks into that quarterback room. And with Bo, I really think our ceiling's like 9-3. So they Oregon fans aren't going to appreciate that because we're Oregon. We shouldn't be going 9-3 as a ceiling. That shouldn't be our ceiling. We should have higher expectations than that. But
do you agree that Bo Nix is a much better quarterback than Anthony Brown?
I don't say much better. He's better. He graded worse than Anthony Brown last year.
I would take Bo Nix over Anthony Brown.
Yeah, I would take Bo. It's not a huge, insane gap or anything.
No.
But I would take Bo. I would take Bo just slightly over Anthony Brown, yes. But also, Anthony Brown had C.J. Verdell, Travis Dye, veteran players around him who had been there. You got inexperienced running backs, inexperienced wide receivers. You got solid tight ends, a good offensive line. So he's going to have the tools. He's just got to make it work. He's got to be that leadership.
The Oregon spring game is either this Saturday or next.
I believe it's next.
Okay.
Yeah, because they've been hyping it up for the 20-something.
Yeah, so the Oregon spring game coming up on the 23rd of April. Okay, so they still have about 10 more practices, something in that range. And there's a lot of teams that have one more practice after the spring game to kind of run through things, and they save one of those practice sessions that they're allowed by the NCAA afterwards. And I think Oregon was one of those teams that I saw on that list. But as we head down the stretch here toward the spring game, you've talked Bo, you've talked Flo. Sewell is obviously a stud, no issue there. What else on this team has you high on 2022, and what are you concerned about?
So the main concern is going to be the defensive line depth. There's not any. There's almost no depth on the defensive line. The only depth you have is freshmen, guys who need developed. There's like some really quality 3-star players, but they're raw. They need developed. They were a 3-star for a reason because they need coached by these college coaches who can unlock that potential that they have. But for immediate play, there's not a lot of depth along the defensive line. I am excited to see if he plays guys like Dante Manning out there, the freshman Jaleel Florence. I know he's also a freshman, and I just was talking about guys not having in-game experience, but skill positions is a much easier transition than the line. If you're playing on the line of scrimmage, it's a whole different ball game every step up. Skill positions, yes, it's also a different ball game. It's also a different level, but it's a lot simpler to transition than it is for a undersized defensive lineman to transition.
Talking Ducks, we got Mike Black on the line. You can catch him on Hot Mike Podcast, also on Ducks and Dogs Podcast. So what would be the best way to access those two podcasts? Do you go to a particular platform or just follow you on Twitter and you post them?
We got them anywhere you can listen to podcasts: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever you can get your podcasts. That's where they're going to be at. Ducks and Dogs Podcast. We're recording an episode in about an hour with George Reister from the. Well, actually, he played for Oregon, played in the NFL, and now he's a media personality as well.
Yeah, George and I have gone back and forth. We follow each other on Twitter. He's a good guy.
There you go.
Yeah, so Ducks and Dogs. A lot of people across the country don't understand, even know about, even I'm talking college football fans. I'm not just talking about somebody that watches the playoffs or the Rose Bowl. Talking about serious college football fans don't really understand the magnitude, and it's more the animosity between Washington and Oregon. They think Oregon State. I'll put myself in that category before talking to guys like you and a number of other Washington and Oregon people here in the last 5 or 10 years that I've grown to realize, okay, these people don't like each other.
Yeah, and to just to make a note of the Oregon State, I don't even consider Oregon State a rival. Like I have no animosity
I know
towards
you've
them.
said that. I don't agree with you. I know
I
you're the
root for
Oregon
them
guy,
11 weeks out of the year.
and I should not, of course, even have an opinion in the deal because you're an Oregon guy. I'm just a national guy looking
They're
in, but it's
the
Oregon
older,
State. It's the Civil
yeah,
War. It
the
has
older
been. I know
Oregon
that name's
fans.
been pushed to the side, but that's what we grew up with. And I would guess nationally,
They would
if
all
you
assume.
asked who Oregon's rival is, that would be the first answer. That would get the most votes. Oregon State.
Yeah, I think especially if you talk to the older Duck fans who weren't they went through Oregon's struggles when Oregon was just competing with Oregon State, and that was about the only team we were competing with in the Pac-12 for a while. But for people of my age, mid-20s, it's Oregon State has won a handful of games, maybe Washington too at that point, but there's just been a lot more animosity with Washington because they have something, they have history over us. Oregon State, it's just, it's always been, hey, yeah, cool. They won 3 games. Nice. Love that. Good job. Maybe you can go to a bowl game next year. But I do want to give you props, by the way, Mark. You finally got you an Oregon helmet back there.
We've got our guy Eric in the live chat. I believe he's in there tonight. We've bulked up our helmets, and I at one point said I'm not buying another helmet. If you want to see helmets, particular helmets, send them in. And so people have been very nice to send in helmets. Yes.
I won't be surprised, by the way, with the rivalries again, just to double back to that, if in 10 years people are saying Oregon's rival is USC.
Yeah.
Because with the conference, it seems they're the only ones who are investing in football heavily. UCLA tried to invest heavily when they brought in Chip Kelly. They paid top money for coordinators. They were paying for a solid staff. But as that defensive coordinator had to get fired, they're paying pennies for a defensive coordinator now. They have no urge to move off of Chip Kelly, whether they think he's doing okay or whatever their thoughts are on that. They seem to have lost their urgency. And UCLA doesn't need football like other schools need football. So that's also a thing. But yeah, USC and Oregon seem to have the only urgency in the conference to be good at football.
Connor Johnson, you can see his allegiance right there.
Yeah,
and
Oregon
he
State
says
fans
it's Oregon State.
Yeah, you're gonna have some animosity towards a team who beats you every year. It's just like the what other rivalries could you think? It's like Georgia Tech, Georgia. Georgia Tech hates Georgia, but Georgia's rival's Florida.
Sure, that's a good analogous situation.
Yeah, and they still don't like Tech as well in Georgia though. But hey, it's similar situation over there.
Is the Pac-12 situation hopeless? Of course, Lincoln Riley going to USC is huge and brings hope, but it's only one school, and it's not an automatic fix, but it is huge. So what can the Pac-12 do to turn things around?
So coincidentally, Minnesota's 247 and USC's 247 page, both of their insiders who write for those pages have mentioned rumors of USC talking to the Big Ten. I know nothing's picked up major steam, and they just said it's something they're hearing, which you can hear anything in the modern times. And we've heard the rumors of Oregon and USC leaving the Pac-12 30 different times now, as many times as we heard the US or Texas, Oklahoma to the Pac-12 rumors. Those were spinning for years, but the Pac-12 really just needs to convince these other schools to invest in football. I mean, these schools just have no urgency and no desire to be good at football. You have Oregon and USC who's putting money in it. UCLA was trying to there for a minute. Washington seems like they're trying to be good, but they're not dumping money into recruiting or into all these other assets that you're going to need if you're out on the West Coast and you're not in a talent bed. Well, they are in a talent bed and they can't keep their talent bed home. So it's just, you need these Pac-12 teams to care more. And there needs to be a financial investment for them to be good. No matter how great of a job Kliavkov has done so far, and I think he's done wonderfully, there's nothing he can do when the school presidents don't care about football.
So when Texas and Oklahoma left for the SEC and that all became known and the parameters around it and so forth, then the ensuing talk for weeks was all sorts of crazy stuff, including what you just mentioned, USC to the Big Ten. But it was USC and somebody else, whether that was UCLA, Oregon, Washington, or just UCLA, or just Oregon. Like for the Big Ten to just run across the country, grab USC, you would think that they would want, and you would think USC would want some kind of hold on the West Coast and to anchor them along and not just be some kind of satellite school for the Big Ten to play, that they would want some kind of connection with, whether that, again, be UCLA and Oregon from proximity factors, but also the value of the name brand of the football program. Those would be the likely candidates.
Yeah. And, you know, I think UCLA would be probably the easiest to do because you would need the state government's approval to separate Oregon and Oregon State. But UCLA, for football wise, doesn't bring anything that USC doesn't bring. USC has a fan base. UCLA has almost none. USC is investing into football heavily, has a lot of momentum right now. UCLA has very little, if any. If you could get USC and Oregon, or the four that was mentioned a few different times, USC, Oregon, UCLA, Washington, or even if you have to appease the government, replace Washington with Oregon State, if you really have to, you're going to cripple the Pac-12 because you take UCLA, USC, and Oregon, who are good at track, basketball, football, and a number of other sports. You're going to take them and just cripple the Pac-12. You're going to leave Arizona for basketball. You're going to leave Stanford for Olympic sports. And it would completely demolish the Pac-12. But at that rate, a lot of them would end up going to the Big 12 or the Mountain West or here and here. But yeah, if the Big 10 could pull off landing Oregon, USC, and whatever other two teams they got to land, that would be a huge addition for those teams and the conference, because the Pac-12 hasn't done anything for Oregon or USC in 10 years.
The SEC sitting at 16, the Big Ten's at 14. They could possibly just pick off two, and 16's a workable number in terms of schedules and divisions and all of that. That would be, you know, we talked up Texas, Oklahoma, which I consider to be the biggest expansion move in the history of college football. But my goodness, if the Big Ten went out and grabbed USC and Oregon,
that'd be big too.
Yes.
In terms of, well, I mean, USC's been dormant about as long as Texas, and Oregon's had about as much recent success as Oklahoma, minus, you know, the Sam Darnold years with their championships and stuff. But yeah, two very comparable programs to another two. USC to Texas, Oregon to Oklahoma. Obviously, Oklahoma's got better history before, and Oklahoma fans in your comments caps lock typing. But yeah, it'd be a very comparable ad, and it would be huge. You'd have Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, and USC. That's insane.
Penn State, Michigan.
Yeah. Penn
Nothing
State.
wrong with Wisconsin, et cetera,
Michigan,
et cetera.
Wisconsin,
It's
Northwestern, Michigan
great
State.
conference.
Yeah.
No.
It's a really solid conference top to bottom.
Then
Minus
you
Rutgers.
wonder Big 12. The Big 12 without Texas, Oklahoma, plus the four that they added from the American Conference, plus BYU, that has made it a very deep conference. It's a very interesting conference.
It's what the Pac-12's been for the past 4 years.
But in terms of having someone that's capable of playing with Ohio State, Georgia, USC, they're not there. They don't exist.
Yeah.
And then Clemson's sitting on an island and waiting for Florida State and Miami to wake up. Man, it's intriguing, but it would seem as though the SEC and the Big Ten might just crush the sport if the Big Ten would go out and get 2 or 4 schools like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, even though people are going to say it's going to be bad for the sport or they're going to crush the sport, at the same time, the Pac-12 has been hurting these football programs more than they've been helping them. Yeah, I know it puts more conferences and it tries to create more parity and separates things. But when the conference is holding back two teams who are trying to contend, and, you know, they're losing out on not only fiscal resources, they're missing out on the respect of playing a decent schedule half of the time. It's just, there's no benefit right now for those teams in the Pac-12. I do think Kliavkoff can turn it around if given time, but people haven't always been patient in this business.
Connor brings up something that has been roaming around my head since this discussion started. If all you're talking about is football, like watching a football game, do I want to see USC and Michigan play? Absolutely. Do I want to see Oregon, Ohio State, all those schools that we just mentioned? Do I want to see those football? Yeah, that'd be phenomenal. But what does your typical USC fan think of? Everybody we play is a million miles away out in the Midwest.
Well, they don't show up 10 miles away, so it doesn't make a difference.
That's true. Yeah, I guess they'd be more apt to travel to go see Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan than they would traveling 10 miles to go see Arizona State.
Yeah, USC is UCLA as well. The LA schools in general haven't had attendance anyway. So it's like, oh, yeah, you're not going to get fans there. Well, they don't have fans there now, so okay.
That would be an odd thing. We got Mike Black here. Check out his podcast. He's got 2 of them. That's how good he is. My goodness. You've got the Hot Mike podcast, Ducks and Dogs podcast, talking Oregon and versus Washington, that rivalry, and the Pac-12. So the Hot Mike podcast, what have you been doing on there recently?
Yeah, so we've been putting together right now, we're just putting together a bunch of interviews with people in and around college football. Just talking about, their stories or their thoughts on things going on in college football, whether it's NIL, the coaching carousel, the transfer portal, everything that's going on, just preparing to get some daily or semi-daily, maybe every other day, some episodes out, just so there's something going on all the way through the start of the season. And then obviously once the season starts, the content makes itself.
Absolutely. All right. Mike, between now and let's see, again, we've got spring practice for another 10 days and we've got the spring game. Then we're going to see more action and activity in the transfer portal as guys see where they stand on the depth chart and look to see whether they can gain some more playing time elsewhere. Has Dan Lanning, I know Lincoln Riley's been very open about the transfer portal. I've heard a few other coaches very open about, expect this at the end of spring ball. Do you think he's going to be pretty active?
I don't know. There's still not a lot of scholarship spots open for this team to take advantage of the portal, but you can always, lose a guy here, add a guy there, lose a guy here, add a guy there. So I think that we're going to see some activity, whether it's going in, going out, or both. But I don't know where they're going to attack. I would like to see them add another defensive lineman or maybe another wide receiver, something of the sort where they're lacking any experience or real depth. But it'll be interesting to see. Dan Lanning's first trip in the portal, they're going after Mims. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah, he's got that connection. Amarius Mims visited Florida State. There's been talk of a few other schools. I was not aware of Oregon, but Dan Lanning taking that opportunity to possibly benefit from that connection.
Yeah, they got added to the list by the insiders at Florida State and Miami, but distance might play a factor there, considering all the other schools are much closer to where he's from in Georgia than Oregon is. But if Oregon could somehow get him out for a visit before he commits, that would be a great sign for the Ducks.
All right, folks, our next show is coming up in about 5 minutes on our Miami channel. Please check us out with the Wholesome One, Hurricanes Live at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Bring your comments and your questions there. Then an hour after that, I am taking your calls on the main channel. And we also have a Penn State show at 8:30. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm not doing the Penn State show, but we've got a couple guys from Black Shoe Diaries on SB Nation doing a Penn State show at 8:30 Eastern as well. And again, I've got a call-in show at 9 o'clock. We're going through the decade of the 2010s and the national champions and determining whether they earned it or not and what other teams could have been placed into playoff consideration. And, of course, that decade started with Auburn, Oregon. That close.
Don't remind me about that game, man.
I know. I know.
That game was not fun. Dyer was down. We should have won.
You would have been great to have in our Miami conversation last night because of the Mario Cristobal move, because some of the players that are being talked about and some of the assistants that came with Mario. Our Miami guy, Kim Underwood, was basically just letting Oregon fans know that from a historical standpoint, from a brand name standpoint, that he puts Miami up here and Oregon more down here. My take was, I get your point, but Oregon has been a much better football playing school over the past decade for sure. That's not even debatable. And I'm saying overall the brand names could be more comparable.
Yeah, the brand names could be more comparable. Miami has the better history, if that was his argument there too. But I mean, they've had the same problem with USC of getting fans to show up. So I don't know if that's as much of a lopsided comparison as he might have led it to believe. But I do think they're going to be really good. I think in the next few years, their floor will start to be like 9 wins as compared to their ceiling being 9 wins as of late. I've got the chance to run into Mario Cristobal a few times as he's been at Miami. Ran into him at Lake Gibson's football banquet when he was down there talking. Cormani McLean plays there, a few other kids. It's been nice. I think they're going to do really good. But yeah, no, that brand, I still think Oregon would be on top of that just because of the support of the Nike brand and the Division Street that we've had. Miami's got their U and the history behind it, but that's about all they have.
Okay. I should get you two together. All right. Again, you can catch Mike on his 2 podcasts on every major audio platform, Hot Mike Podcast and Ducks and Dogs Podcast as well. Mike, we appreciate you being here to break down some Oregon football for us, and we'll catch up with you soon.
I appreciate you. Maybe next time I'll be on time.
You're good. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. It's great to have everyone here. We are shutting down this stream, heading on over to the Miami channel for Hurricanes Live at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Then we've got a call-in show on the main channel at 9. See you soon.